information, should you choose to accept it.
It's a quest. It's a quest for fun.
Well, The Rock says, why don't we just cut right to the chase?
Okay, now he wants to get together. Well, he wants to talk.
I want you to do me a favor. I want you to tell all your friends about me.
It's showtime, folks!
What are you?
Greetings and salutations. Welcome to And I Quote, the weekly show where we introduce you to content creators of all shapes and sizes that join us from many and all corners of the nerd universe, and we take your questions. I am your host, Ryan of Nerd Culture, and our guest this week is fantasy writer Brian D. Anderson. Please welcome him to the program. Brian, how you doing, brother?
Hey, great, man. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for being here. We greatly appreciate it. Now, if you have any questions for Brian D. Anderson as we go throughout the course of this show, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the live chat. Our producers are going to keep an eye on that as we go throughout the course of the program. But in the meantime, Brian, what would you say were some of your favorite books or writers growing up?
Oh, wow. You know, the first book I remember reading was Kidnapped by Robert Louis Stevenson. But it was a little above my head when I tried to read it. I think it was like 7 or 8 years old. So it was a little over my head. But I love the cover. I had a ship and a on the cover. That was like back. It was we're talking back in the 1970s. So that where they would all the covers look like oil paintings, especially on the classics. But what got me into fantasy was Tolkien, just like a lot of other writers my age, and my uncle had a bedroom that still at my grandparents' house that still had all his stuff in it from when he was a kid. When we would spend the night there, I would read the books that he had left over, and the Tolkien book was one of the last ones that I had ever picked up. He had all the Tom Swift Jr. books and a bunch of stuff like that. And I finally picked up this old copy of Fellowship of the Ring, and I just fell in love with it. And I had to leave it there, though, because it wasn't mine to take. And I eventually got in touch with my uncle, and he said, oh, yeah, of course, I could take it with me. And then from there, I just remember all these great writers that came up, especially during the 80s. Like, I remember Terry Brooks's debut, Magic Kingdom for Sale, was such an inspirational book. It kind of showed me that you didn't have to write like Tolkien to enjoy fantasy. And I remember the Zanth novels, and just so many. And I was also really heavily into science fiction at the time. I remember I was reading Asimov, the Foundation series, and the robot books. I, Robot, and Robot Dreams, and all those all that kind of stuff. So, my influences began with who was it, and during the early 80s, basically. So I remember when I got a little older reading Orson Scott Card, and God, the list just really just continues on and on. But I promise you, if you go to look at Sanderson or Dan Wells or Patrick Rothfuss and their list of books, you're gonna find that we have a very similar list of inspirations from our early years.
Absolutely. Good response there. Good response. Quick sidebar, though. What are your thoughts, not counting the prequels, but I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on the original Lord of the Rings trilogy that's already turned 20 this year? And number two, what do you think about the prequel series that's coming out with the Rings of Power?
Well, if you're talking about the movies, I think Peter Jackson did a fantastic job with those movies. We finally, technology progressed to a point to where those movies could be made. And I know that people wanted to do it a long time ago, but really the CGI and the things you would need to make those movies, it really didn't come around until Peter Jackson did that. But he did a fantastic job. I know some people criticize him for not sticking strictly to the books, but I don't see how he could have. I know a lot of people wanted to see Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil is one of my favorite characters in all Tolkien lore, but he didn't really do anything to move the story forward. So he had to be sacrificed to keep telling that story. So to me, the original 3 books, the three movies were some of the greatest pieces of cinema ever created. The prequels, I don't know what to feel about that. You know, I mean, I'm hearing a lot of things, both positive and negative. And I don't want to jump on the negative bandwagon, but at the same time, I really love the Tolkien lore. And I'm almost afraid to see it because I'm afraid to be disappointed, like I was with the Hobbit movies. I really thought the Hobbit was a misstep with the Hobbit movies, and I don't want to. And like I said, I love the lore so much. To see somebody butcher it would really upset me. So I'm sort of up in the air about even if I even want to see it, because, like I said, I keep on hearing it has nothing to do with who's playing whose role, or I'm not bringing any sort of identity politics into my judgment, but if you're talking about sticking to the lore itself and to the story and to Tolkien's vision, then I think, you know, either write what Tolkien intended or don't, you know, or do something else. That's kind of where I fall on that. I don't care who plays a hobbit, who plays an elf, that kind of stuff. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the storytelling. So the Hobbit, though, I mean, oh my God. They tried to take a children's book and turn it into a 3-movie series, a 3-movie adult series of adult movies, and it was a children's book. They should have made it they should have made it into a younger movie. They had to force a romantic interest in there between an elf and a dwarf, which was ridiculous. They some of the choices they made were meant to, I think, make it appeal to older audiences. Mm-hmm. It was a book that was it was from a book that was never meant to appeal to older readers.
There you go. Fair points. Absolutely. We'll see. We shall see what happens with how they're moving forward with the Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, which I believe is an Amazon Prime series. It's coming out soon. Mm-hmm. So we'll see where the chips fall, where they may. But when did you decide to become a writer, Brian?
Well, I always enjoyed writing as a hobby, and I always kind of had a flair for it. My wife had encouraged me to take it more seriously, and I just never did. I just never really saw myself as, you know, doing that for a living. I thought you had to go get your PhD in literature in order to be a writer. What did I know? I just knew I enjoyed it and people liked what I did. It wasn't until I was nearly 40, actually, that I was, you know, I would write for, you know, just for fun, you know, just a way to blow off creative steam. And my son, who was about 7 years old at the time, he came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, I got this idea for a story," and he wanted to tell it to me. So I listened to it and I thought it was amazing. And he asked me if I'd write it. I said, absolutely. So I put down what I was doing and had to change things up, you know, because he was 7. There were certain things that needed to be fixed. But it came out the first book of the Godling Chronicles, and this was right at the onset of the indie explosion during the 2010 to 2012 period. And I just came around at the right time, and it was a really good story. My writing at the time was still very amateurish. There were some lessons I hadn't quite learned yet, and things that I think I do better now. But the story was solid, and people loved it, and it launched my career. In no time, book 2 came out, and I'd sold 50,000 copies in like almost no time at all. And by the time I got to the third book, books 1 and 2 were just staying on the top 3, 4, 5 of the Amazon charts, and it just sort of, that's how it sort of happened for me, and my career just sort of took off from there.
Well, congratulations to that. Once again, we're talking with fantasy writer Brian D. Anderson here on this episode of And I Quote. Make sure you like and share this video with all 200 of your closest friends. They're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote. I guarantee it. If you got any questions for Brian D. Anderson during any portion of the show, let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you. We encourage it very much so. With that being said, what would you say are some of the biggest rewards about being a writer?
The people you meet, the fans, the lives you get to touch, one life in particular, and I love telling this story, so please indulge me. It was not long after the second book of the Godling Chronicles came out that I received a letter from a woman named Helen in the UK, and she said that she was a foster mom and she would take on special needs children. There's one child in particular. Her name's Christy. I can say that now because she's reached the age of majority, but at the time she only knew her as Kay because she was a minor. And Christy had some issues. She had some emotional issues. She had some genetic problems. She was mildly autistic, and so she had a real rough time and was abandoned by her parents, and they took her on holiday. And when a child's autistic, one of the things that you have to take into account is routine, and the importance of routine. And that was with Christy, the routine was they would read the Horrid Henry books at bedtime, and but she never really engaged. She would just lay there staring into nothing while the book was being read, and at the end of the story, she would go to sleep. Well, they forgot the Horrid Henry books now, this is bad news. So, but one of Helen's daughters had read the first book of the Godling Chronicles and said, "Hey, I have this. There's nothing in it," because I wrote it as a YA fantasy, and there's nothing in it that's inappropriate. So the first night didn't go well though. Reading. She didn't enjoy it. Second night, no better. But by the third night, a character was introduced that kind of sounded like her name, and she identified, and she goes, "That's my name." He goes, yeah. So she started really listening and identifying with the story, and just made such a deep connection to this story that because of the ways the characters interacted, instead of she would have been kicked out of all her schools because of violent outbursts and showing inappropriate aggression, she started actually taking on a nurturing role because of the way the characters interacted in the book. And it had such a profound effect on her life. I mean, that I could have never anticipated my silly little story having on somebody's life. And so, and she wrote me and telling me about all this. By the end of the letter, it was probably about a 6-page letter. I was in tears. And I'm still friends with Helen, and to this day. And but I remember at the time I wrote Christy a letter from one of the characters, and she was going to go see her parents, and at the end of each meeting she would cry and not understanding why they had abandoned her. But at the end of this meeting, Helen had put on the seat the letter that she knew who it was from. So she was just excited about the letter. And at the end of it, she was like, I don't need them. I have you. And talking to Helen. And that's it. Like I said, that to me, that is the best part about being a writer, when you can actually have a significant positive impact on somebody. And even though we're telling silly little stories that in the big scheme of things that don't mean a lot, but it can mean something profoundly. It can be so touching and so meaningful to the reader, and you just never know who and when that will who that will happen to, and when it will happen. But when it does, it's just, there's nothing quite like it.
Oh my goodness gracious. That is amazing, Brian. And thank you so much for sharing that with us. That is great stuff. It really is. And on the flip side of the coin, though, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges about being a writer?
Oh, wow. Was it say it's not easy being greasy? Sometimes you have to push through creatively when you're not feeling creative. People have this misconception that, we sit here and all of a sudden the muse strikes and then we start creating. No, we got deadlines, and we have to push. We have people that are counting on us doing our job. And so writing under those conditions sometimes can be very challenging mentally and emotionally. Physically, it's challenging because it's very hard to stay fit when you're sitting behind a desk pounding on a keyboard for hours and hours at a time. So, I mean, the life of your average writer is not what anybody would consider glamorous. I mean, it's very rewarding. Don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want to do anything else, right. But it can be a lot of work, and it can really test who you are in ways that you wouldn't have anticipated, that I wouldn't have anticipated going in.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. Well, that's understandable. That's understandable for sure. And when it comes to some of the things you've worked on, or should I say some of the books and the works that you've published in the past, and once again, these are in no particular order for those who may be watching or listening to this, but I do want to share something with you here. I'm just curious. This one, The Swords, is it Elegy? Am I saying that right?
The Swords Elegy, yes.
I did say that right. Okay, so I'm not a complete mess up. I try to do my best on this show, folks.
You're doing great.
I'm doing my bloody best here, all right? So The Swords Elegy, what exactly is that, and how did you come up with this idea?
Okay, The Swords Elegy is book 3 of the Sorcerer song series, and it's coming out November 1st through Tor Books. Oh. And the first book is called The Bard's Blade, which you have on the screen behind me. And the way that whole series came about was it's kind of funny. I had just finished the second book in the sequel to the Godling Chronicles, and I was a little burnt out, and I needed kind of a palate cleanser. And I'd never done flash fiction before, and I didn't know how to do it. And this real big fan of Mark Lawrence's, got on this writing and reading site or group that I'm a part of, and said that it was putting on a flash fiction contest. Mm-hmm. Had to be 300 words, had to have this word and this word in it. And I'm like, what the hell? I'll give it a try. And failed miserably, couldn't keep it under 300 words. But by the end of it, I had an idea that turned out to be this entire series that we sold to Tor.
My goodness gracious, the things that happen when you least expect it.
Oh yeah, man. Life's kind of funny old life, isn't it?
And you brought this up a moment ago, and once again, we're looking at this image of the Swords Elegy, but just to give the person watching or listening to this an idea, you're referring to the Bard's Blade. That you have in your background there. And the Bard's Blade is the first of a series?
The first book is the Bard's Blade. Second book is A Chorus of Fire. And the third book's called the Bard's Elegy. There's a music theme going on because you have Bard magic. One of the two main characters is a musician. Mm-hmm. So that sort of goes through. It's classic epic high fantasy. I wouldn't say I'm breaking any molds with the story, but I was able to really develop these characters and try to make them relatable to the reader in a way that you can sort of see yourself in them as they grow, and sort of ask yourself, would you have made the same choices that this character made? One of the main characters, the musician Lim, he is thrown down a very dark path. But still manages to hang on to the good part of him that set him. He went down a very dark path for a very good reason,
Gotcha.
So
that sounds similar to certain other characters we may have come across in our readings.
So yeah, and then the other main character, Mariah, she has a harder time of it when she she's on kind of a separate arc altogether, especially in the beginning, has a harder time of it initially, and by the end you start to realize something about her towards the end, that a lot of the things that she's doing, that was who she was all along. You know what I mean? And you know, and I try to pose the question, how much of what we do is acquired through our experience, and how much of what we do is just revealed because of our experience?
Fascinating stuff, and I'm digging it. And you mentioned, I believe it was the second book in this series. That would be A Course of Fire, I should say. Really good looking covers, man. Seriously, I look at these covers, I'm thinking this looks like a really, you know, kick-tail adventure I'd want to jump in on.
There's actually a cool story behind that. The covers are done by Felix Ortiz. He did stuff for Rob Hayes, bunch of guys. He's very talented artist, super neat guy. I'd seen him in certain groups I was in. Now, my editor over at Tor, she was also Nicholas Eames' editor when she worked at Orbit for Kings of the Wild. And when Davey Pillai came over to Tor, she brought my editor over there with her. Now, back when Kings of the Wild came out, Felix had done some fan art for that book, and she saw it and really was impressed by it. Now, fast forward 2 years, she calls me up and she goes, "Hey, I want you to take a look at this guy's art, and do you know who he is?" I knew who he was. I didn't know him, but I knew I'd seen him before. So I take a look at it and I say, "Yes, brilliant, no problem. Let's do that. You know, I'm happy to use this guy." He says, "The art department will almost certainly go with this guy, but we can't say anything to him yet, and because if they say no, then I look like an asshole." So I'm,
let's watch what we say, watch what we do. Let's not try to put the cart before the horse.
I apologize.
No, it's all good. It's all good. It happens all the time.
I don't look good in that particular circumstance. But so
it's okay.
So I'm for like 2 months, 3 months. I'm seeing this guy online, and he's been trying to break into traditional publishing for a long time, and he's even posted stuff online. Yeah, I still can't break into traditional publishing. And I'm like, I'm about to change his life, and I can't say anything to him. So it's like, and it comes from just 2 years prior, the right person seeing his stuff, and he didn't know at the time. There was no way for him to predict that. And so it does kind of go to show you when you're putting your art out there, you're putting your shows out there, you put whatever it is you're doing, that you don't know who's watching. So because, you know, and so it's a very good reason to always put your best foot forward and always put your best work out there. Because you don't, even if you feel like you're spinning your wheels, somebody who can impact your life may be watching you.
There you go. Enough said, right? Mic drop moment. Once again, we're talking with fantasy writer Brian D. Anderson here on this episode of And I Quote. Make sure you like and share this episode with all 300 of your closest friends, because they're going to like the way they look after watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote. I guarantee it. If you have any questions for Brian D. Anderson as we go throughout the course of the program, let us know in the chat. Let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Look forward to doing so. With that being said, any special memories for you from being at conventions, whether you're there as an attendee or you're there as a vendor selling your books?
Well, I told you one a while back, but I don't think that one's appropriate.
No, it's all right. Some things should stay in the backstage area of a respective studio. But if there's anything you can share with us that maybe not so, you know, off the beaten path, feel free to share it with us.
Well, you know, I mean, I love doing the shows, because the shows I get to actually meet existing fans and make new fans and meet fantastic writers and celebrities, and you know, like I've gotten to hang out with Kevin McNally from Pirates of the Caribbean. He was Mr.
Nice.
Gibbs, and one of the sweetest people you'd ever want to meet. You get to meet all these really cool people, but I'm really looking forward to Dragon Con this year. Because this is going to be my first year as an actual guest, and that's kind of a bucket list item for a writer. And I get to do 4 panels. Now, and this is not being inappropriate. These are actual panels at DragonCon.
Mm-hmm.
First, I'm doing Stabbity is one of the names. Talk about swords. Then I'm doing the Conan 90th anniversary panel. Then I'm doing Wheel of Time, the TV show, not the book.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
What we think to expect for next season, and then sex workers in fantasy. I swear to God, that's a panel. And
wow, okay.
and I'm like, and I saw it, I was like, okay, yeah, we're getting protested.
Boy, the crazy things that happen at certain conventions around the world.
I'm really kind of excited about that panel, because it's an interesting topic. Because it does come in brothels and stuff like that, come in all the time in the fantasy genre, and you and these characters, the people who work there, they can be very interesting characters. I've actually my Akiri character. I had some interactions in those settings, and they're important to fantasy, and they're important how they relate to fantasy. So it's not I'm not going to be going in there giggling like it's some silly topic. It's actually quite interesting, serious thing to talk about, and I'm looking forward to it.
No, I'm sure you are, and as well as the 90th anniversary of Conan the Barbarian.
90th anniversary of Conan the Barbarian.
That's crazy.
Robert E. Howard in Strange Tales, I think it was called. Wrote the first story of Conan.
That's a lot of history.
That is in 1922. I think it would have been something if it's 90th anniversary.
Or I think it's 1932. I think it's 1932 because we're in 2022. You take that, it's 90. Yeah.
Okay, 32. 1932.
Yeah, it's 1932 because that's also
right.
So that's also the same time some of the other pulp characters were coming out. The pulp magazines were coming out. You had guys like the Phantom. You had the Shadow. You had
stuff goes back even further. Like I was talking about Tom Swift Jr. The original Tom Swift novels came back at around like 1910 to 1915.
Oh my gosh.
And the junior books came out in the 50s and 60s during there's kind of the golden age of sci-fi. I guess people consider that when sci-fi was got really big. When you had all the robot movies, and there was an interesting shift during that time too in science fiction, especially in the movie genre, where aliens went from being mindless creatures to being more. One single movie changed that, and that was The Day the Earth Stood Still. The first movie that aliens were smarter than we were. Every other time they were more brutish monsters and stuff like that, but that was the turning point in that genre.
My goodness gracious!
What made me think of that?
No, it's okay. The more you know. So there you go. There's nothing. There's nothing wrong with that. But yeah, Conan the Barbarian's a big one, and obviously I think Robert E. Howard was also involved in the creation of Solomon Kane. Another popular character. That's good stuff. And the movie for that came out like 10, what was it, like 20? I think it was it was like 10, 12 years ago with James Purefoy playing the title role. Great underrated film is Solomon Kane. If you have not seen the movie Solomon Kane, treat yourself because James Purefoy is one heck of an actor.
Tell you what, Robert Jordan was also was one of the writers for Conan back when he was a young writer. I remember reading some of the early. That was my first introduction to Robert Jordan, was reading his Conan novels.
Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
I can dig that, brother. Yeah. So
he did good. I used to love those things. Fantasy has evolved so much since Conan. I get why it was male centric at the time, because most of those kind of novels you had, damsel in distress wrapped around Conan's leg. There's not very much there for a young lady to be interested in. I used to make a joke about how to plot a Conan story. Conan rides into town, eats what he wants, kills who he wants, takes your woman, and there's nothing you can do about it. Conan leaves town. The end.
I would say that is pretty simple and to the point, and there you go. But with that being said, man, well, congrats on becoming a guest at what is known as DragonCon for 2022. We wish you the best of luck with those panels, especially some of them being a little bit more entertaining than some others. With that being said, what advice would you give to aspiring writers out there?
I'm just okay. When I give advice to some up and comer, you try to make it practical and something you can actually use. Writing is like anything else; it takes practice. The more you write, the better you'll get at it. It is no different than any other activity. Thinking about writing does not make you a better writer. And read a lot. And read critically. If you like George Martin's work, and he's a brilliant writer, if you like the way George Martin writes, next time you read something by George Martin, aside from paying attention to the story, pay a lot of attention to how he frames dialogue, where he fits description in, how he the nuts and bolts of what he's doing can be more informative than any creative writing class that you could ever take. That, like I said, and do a lot of writing. You do those two things, you will increase your skill set. As far as storytelling goes, I mean, learn the basics of story structure. It's important. I think Trey Parker and Matt Stone from South Park, oddly enough, gave a very simplistic but very poignant way of looking at story structure. They came into some class or something like that. The video's available online. The words between each instance in your story, the words "and then" should almost never be there. This happened, and then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. Should not be the case. It should be this happened, therefore this happened. This happened, but this happened, therefore this happened. And each part of telling a story is creating questions and then resolving them into answers. If you continue to run on and on and on and on and on with no resolution, the reader will eventually disengage, and that you don't want that. So those are the pieces of advice I would give for aspiring writers, to pay attention to that.
Awesome sauce, and thank you so much for sharing that with us. Once again, we're talking with Brian D. Anderson, fantasy writer, here in this episode of And I Quote. Make sure you share this episode with all 500 of your closest friends, because they're going to like the way they look if they're watching or listening to this episode of And I Quote. I guarantee it. And also, if you have any questions for Brian D. Anderson, let us know in the comments. Let us know in the chat. We'd love to hear from you as you go throughout the course of the program. With that being said, you mentioned a few names earlier, but I'm just curious, who would you say are some of your favorite writers of today, Brian?
Oh, wow. Easy. Dan Wells. I'm to be full disclosure, I do know Dan personally, but even if I'd never met him, his writing is absolutely brilliant. Brandon Sanderson, of course. How do you not like Brandon's work? Oh my God! I like for science fiction. I like Chris Ruccio. He's a really talented young writer. He's an up and comer. He's somebody to really look out for. R.R. Verdi is just had his debut novel with Tor. I've read some of his work. He's a really talented young writer. Nice young man too. He's really worked hard. He deserves the success he's getting. I like Abercrombie's writing a lot. He loses me sometimes with the story, but I would stay with it just because of how brilliant a writer he is. No matter what he was writing, no matter what Abercrombie's writing, he does it brilliantly. So those are some of my favorites.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing this. I want to take this opportunity to let you know that this episode of And I Quote and every episode of And I Quote is indeed powered by our good friends over there at Poddex. Now, Poddex are unique interview questions and episode starting prompts in the palm of your very own hand. So whether you are a new podcaster or you're an existing broadcaster looking to grow your audience or get more engagement, you're going to want to check out poddex.com. Use the code Ryan10, that's RY10, RYAN10, all one word, Ryan10 for 10% off your first order. You're not going to miss out on that, powered by Poddex. With that being said, Brian, which actor which actor would you want to play you in a movie of your life?
Brad Pitt, man. You know,
Got to go with Fight Club. Got to go with Tyler Durden.
I don't know. I mean, God.
I mean, he did come out more recently with Bullet Train, so there you go.
You know, I've always, you know, he's one of my favorite. I think he's a brilliant actor. I know a lot of people in his early days thought he was this, you know, teen heartthrob bubblegum, you know, that kind of. But man, he turned out to be such a brilliant actor. I think the first thing I remember seeing him in was Thelma and Louise.
Yes, the Drifter.
So, a lot of people forget he was in that. But I mean, he could de-age you enough, and then me and him are about the same age now. So
worked out for him pretty well in the Curious Case of Benjamin Button.
Oh my God, what a great movie! What a wonderful, you know, they did that so thoughtfully, and concentrate, and the character development on that was so well done, and so they didn't skip the steps for fear of the character development, for fear of losing the audience, and that was what impressed me most about that movie. And of course, Fight Club is probably, to me, one of the all-time best films ever made. So, period.
I thought we weren't supposed to talk about Fight Club. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. See what I did there? But even
I grew up in a Fight Club.
Oh, geez. Boy, that's a story for entirely.
Small town in the deep south.
Okay. All right. Listen, you got to do what you got to do. You got to do what you got to do, whatever the environment may be. What gives you butterflies in your stomach?
Oh, wow.
Could be anything.
God, nothing much these days. Seeing my son do something new and exciting still is. I've lost pretty much all the kind of fears and anxieties that I have for me. I've done a lot of public speaking. I've been on television, radio, and stuff like that. I've met a lot of famous people, so that kind of stuff doesn't really impact me anymore. But my son, like I saw, he rode a motorcycle for the first time. He's going to, you know, he's all these new things. He's 19 years old, and you know, all these new things he's doing. That still gives me butterflies, and it's still, you know, that's still to me it's not really living vicariously. It's almost watching his accomplishments or mine, because you know, I helped to raise him. So yeah, that's what gives me butterflies.
Right on, man. What would you do with an extra hour in a day?
Sleep.
We all need our beauty rest, partner. We got to get them rest, boy. We don't get those solid hours of sleep. We're flipping zombie.
Beauty rest. This is what happens when you don't get it.
Start to get these over here and over here and over yonder. You know what I'm saying?
The beard covers up a lot of sins.
It does, doesn't it? I'm trying to grow mine out right now, as you can see. This is what a week will get you with this good looking set of facial hair. But anyway, that's neither here nor there.
You ever had one of these things go completely off the rails? I'll ask you a question.
What do you mean? Have I ever had one of my shows go off the rails?
Interviews, you ever had something just go completely off the rails with somebody?
Maybe one or two guests I've had in the past. I can't exactly, because I've been doing this show for 2 years now, and granted, we were doing it during the lockdown. A lot of things tended to blend.
Yeah.
So I would say maybe once or twice we've had a bit of a situation where things have gone off the rails, but I try to rein them back in as best I can, because I try to keep this show going on a nice and fun and steady track.
Yes. Family friendly.
I do my absolute best. It's not easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it here with you.
I mean,
or the person who's watching or listening to this, but running a podcast or running a show or any type of operation is never going to be easy.
Nah, well, the profanity is the thing that I have a hard time refraining from.
It's
Mainly
okay. We
because
all have a slip of the tongue. It's okay.
Well, I'm by myself most of the time. I spend a lot of time in my office. I don't have anybody really caring one way or the other what I say.
To jibber jabber with, yeah.
And so it's like, but you slip sometimes. You try to be careful. Okay. You try to be considerate of others. Because some people are sensitive to that. But, I mean, I'm sure you've run into, well, I slipped once during this interview. So.
It's okay. We all make mistakes, and we just learn from it. That's all. I mean, I try to keep it as 9 times out of 10, this show has been family friendly, but this is the 10th time. No, it's okay. It's fine. We're going to live through it. We're going to get through it with lots of therapy afterwards. After I leave the studio, I'm going to go right over to that person's office. I'm going to sit down with them for a couple of hours and maybe kick back a few. I don't know. But either way, that's not
Harley Davidson for.
Exactly. Whatever works for the individual, that's up to them.
You never see a Harley parked in front of my therapist's office.
No, I don't believe I have. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. What is something you love that is vintage? Anything stand out to you in that regard?
A lot of things. I love antiques of all kinds. I like when you say vintage, do you mean antique or do you mean just something from maybe my youth?
Yeah, it could be anything from your youth or something that is actually vintage, like an antique or something like that. It could be anything. You can interpret this question however you want.
Cars from back in the 50s and 60s.
There you go.
They would look like they weren't just vehicles. They were pieces of art. They were somebody's design.
That's right.
They really took time to give the car not just an engine and a steering wheel and windows, but they gave it character. It was I love that era of design of cars. They were, and I love and of course, vintage guitars. Back when like bird's eye maple and flame maples were not such rare woods. It's probably what made them rare woods, but that's regardless. They were still beautiful instruments and things like that. Anything that you see that somebody. So there's some old buildings that you see that you tell how much love and care was put into the construction of them. Anything with that kind of love, care, and beauty, I couldn't really pin it down to one thing. I love the feel of old books and the way the bindings are just lovingly crafted. And I mean, we as a species have really created some magnificent things. And I could spend the rest of this show just talking about all the beautiful things that I love. I mean.
No, that's very true. In a way, life is beautiful, depending on what you're looking at or what you're passionate about and all that kind of stuff. There's no right or wrong way to interpret that. It's just up to the person individually. But with that being said, what is one surefire way to grab your attention?
All right, I'm gonna let that joke go on by and grasp for something a little more serious here.
It's okay.
There's a couple.
We appreciate your discretion. It's okay.
Well, I mean, it depends on the situation.
If you're at a Comic-Con, what's a great way to grab your attention?
Eye contact. Which is difficult for some people, especially at a Comic-Con. And I'm not saying this in a kind of disparaging way. Oh. And I'm actually saying this as one of the things I love about nerd culture and Comic-Cons. To get my attention, enthusiasm for nerd culture is the best way to do it. If you want to get my specific attention, eye contact, because I'll look back at you. But I know that's difficult for some people, so I try to also read other cues that somebody's interested in speaking about my work. Comic-Cons and nerd culture is something I would like to touch on a little bit. That Comic-Cons and nerd culture opens up an avenue for people who are a lot of times have difficulties in social situations to feel like they belong somewhere, and like they're not always the weirdest person in the room, because they can look around them and everybody's just as weird as they are. and to come to that reality and come to that realization, I think is really helpful for some people. And some people, that's the only time they can be in a social situation is when they're surrounded by that sort of culture. And I think those kind of conventions, I've heard people say, well, one day they'll all be virtual. I don't know. God, I hope not, because it is such a wonderful way for people to express that part of themselves, especially for some people who have otherwise no other outlet to express themselves. And I hope those kind of conventions never stop being an in-person event. And I tell you what, I have noticed a lot of middle-aged men who suffered through the lockdown and went kind of going crazy. They're suffering financially because, they were out of work, laid off, whatever. And going to a con is an inexpensive day out. I mean, for $45, you can get a day pass, and that gives you access to all the panels and all sorts of stuff to do that you don't get charged extra for. I mean, there's stuff you can still spend a lot of money in a con, but you don't have to. I mean, so some guy who wants to take his grandkids out and I saw this repeatedly. I did like 10, 15 cons last year or this year, and that they were taking their grandkids out because they really didn't have a lot of money to take their kids out. And because, like I said, they were coming out of the pandemic. It was finally something they could do. Their kids were loving it. They see Captain Marvel over here, Captain America over there. They're enjoying it. And it costs the parents or the grandparents about the same as it would if they took them all out to dinner. So I'm like, so what a great thing. And what a great thing that nerd culture has finally hit the mainstream in that way, to where these people who would normally, under any other circumstances, thought about going to a Comic-Con, all of a sudden you see them there too, and they realize, hey, I didn't have to dress up. I could just go and enjoy myself. And that's what a lot of people are doing. And I just love the daggum things. It's just, they're just so much, they're everything that's great about nerd culture, in my view.
I knew there was a great reason for me to keep this tapestry up here in my studio. See, he keeps plugging us without even, without even me giving him the cue. It's like, please plug this channel.
Yes.
But even so, it's all good. Listen, we're all family here. That's what I'm saying. It's all good stuff, man. It really is. And those last few questions were indeed brought to you by our good friends over there at Poddex. Make sure you check them out, poddex.com. Use that promo code Ryan10, 10% off your order. It's some really, really good stuff. Yeah. So with that being said, I want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Brian D. Anderson for being our guest this week on And I Quote. Brian, thank you so much for being here. Where can the person watching or listening to this find you on social media and everything that you have coming up?
You can find me at author Brian D. Anderson at Blogspot. You can find me briandanderson.com. You can find me on Facebook. Basically, if you just put in Brian D. Anderson, I come up everywhere. So I'm one of the easiest people to find. You Google Brian D. Anderson and I show up, and I am very responsive. If you have questions for me, questions about my work, questions about my upcoming appearances, I do respond to emails and messages, as long as they're not crazy pants stuff, which I have had happen. But yeah, that's how you get in touch with me. I'm going to be appearing at DragonCon September 1st through the 5th in Atlanta, Georgia. Then I will, 2 weeks later, I forget the date, but I will be at FanX in Salt Lake City, Utah. Oh, also at Chattanooga Comic-Con in October.
There you go. Awesome stuff. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, I should say, Brian. Stick around here for a minute, if you will. My name is Ryan of Nerd Culture. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at RyanRPM5. That's Ryan, RYAN, RPM, and the number 5. It's all one word. On social media for all the upcoming podcasts and projects. Once again, And I Quote is on Saturdays at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So make sure you check out those episodes there. Also, want to thank our friends over there at theradbear.com. The best nerd brand in the business today. If you're looking for something from your favorite properties, from Power Rangers to The Neverending Story to anime to movies, other television series of all kinds, check them out at theradbear.com. Make sure you use that promo code Ryan10, RYAN10 for 10% off your order. It's more phenomenal. Let me tell you something. It's truly more phenomenal what those guys are doing over there. So check it out. You're not going to be disappointed. Also, our next watch along is coming up. We're going to be celebrating the 15th anniversary of the remake of 3:10 to Yuma with Russell Crowe and Christian Bale. It turns 15 this year. It's crazy how time flies when you're having fun. Goes down Wednesday night, September the 7th, 2022 at 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and YouTube, simply at It's Nerd Culture. Make sure you're following us on all forms of social media so you get notified. Smash that notification bell so you get notified of when our next videos and our next projects go live. Also, a great event coming up in the month of January 2023. It is called the Multiverse Fundraiser. It is a free virtual convention that you can attend from the comfort of your very own home. We're going to have celebrity guests. We're going to have very special topics and special panels. And we're going to be raising money in donation to the Ritter Rally. Hence the reason it's called the Ritter Rally, for the John Ritter Foundation. Going to be doing something special to honor the legacy of the late, great John Ritter. So check it out at www.themultiversefundraiser.com. It's going to be presented by our good friends over at Back of the Cereal Box Podcast Network. So make sure you check all that stuff out. You're not going to miss out on it. It's going to be a lot of fun. And January 20th through the 22nd of 2023, the Multiverse Fundraiser. And let me tell you, speaking from experience, fun will be had. It will be had. So you got to check it out. And in the meantime, stay healthy, stay strong, stay safe. And remember, life is so much better when reading. Take a look.
Famous Faces and Funnies in Melbourne, Florida is leading the way in pop culture fun. From comic books and graphic novels to Funko Pops and collector's items, Famous Faces and Funnies has it all. Rick Shea and the professional team at Famous Faces and Funnies are friendly and knowledgeable. Whether you're looking for toys, props, collector treasures, or a new comic book, Famous Faces and Funnies is your one-stop shop. To find Famous Faces and Funnies on Facebook and Twitter, just type at FFF Comics.
Sweet dreams they placed on me inside my mind. Chance my truth, twist the past, my memories are fading fast. Am I still missed? You understand? Who do you want me to be? Am I still missed?
Join author Gary Zeiger for an animatic short film based on his Breakaway Stingray novel series. Watch this animatic short based on the novel Stingray, You Can't Hide Forever at stingrayseries.com. In Stingray, You Can't Hide Forever, Captain Epsilon is putting the band back together to rescue his protege's little sister from the evil conglomerate, while keeping his state-of-the-art warship, Stingray, out of their hands. Watch as the adventure unfolds in the groundbreaking animatic short at stingrayseries.com. Then, join the crew of Stingray with the next novel in the series, Stingray Prophecy, where Captain Epsilon and Dr. Zubre are pivotal players in an ancient prophecy. Can they reunite the people of two worlds before they destroy each other? To learn more, visit stingrayseries.com.
Choose high-flying action. Choose death-defying escapes. Choose spine-tingling thrills. Choose nail-biting intrigue. Now's your chance to Choose the adventure. The Captain Hawkland Adventures. Available on Amazon.com.
Author Cindy Kep is writing on the edge. Books include Remnant in the Stars, The Loudest Actions, Lines of Succession, Mindstorm, Condemned Courier, the Yerushalayim series, and Animal Eye. Find author Cindy Kep at CKOEPP.com today.
You've worked hard and written a great book. Now, it's time to give it a great cover. If you're an indie author or small press publisher, Plasmafire Graphics is your source for affordable cover illustration and graphic design. Plasmafire Graphics, when the look of your book matters to you.
Good morning! Oh, and in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.